David Kosoy of Sterling Companies in the Bahamas has recently announced a proposal to reopen TCI Bank Limited. According to a press conference Friday, April 23rd, that proposal seeks to stabilize the bank, purchase existing performing loans, and to bring substantial new deposits, to name a few. Kosoy said he needs the Turks and Caicos National Insurance Board, NIB, on stream to accomplish these goals. Kosoy said the NIB refused to negotiate. Chairman of the Board of the Directors of NIB, Irvin Quelch, in an exclusive interview, told us his side of the story.
We have a primary duty to the fund, to the NIB fund, a primary duty, and to the thousands of stakeholders of the fund. Mr. Kosoy presented a proposal to the Board of Directors of the bank. I believe it was sometime in January. The NIB, because of its significant interest, had been asked to comment on this proposal and to consider its position in that regard. The NIB did so with the benefit of proper and competent legal advice and with the advice of its Investment Advisory Committee. The board took a position and sought to advise Kosoy on that position. In fact, we reverted to the bank's board, advising them of our position. That position was communicated to Kosoy.
From the very outset, Quelch said there were issues of concern.
One of the initial aspects of the proposal that Kosoy had presented was that the NIB, that once he reopened the bank, the NIB had to give a 10-year commitment to leave its funds in the bank at a paltry rate of interest of about 1.5%, I believe, to 2%. First of all, the board thought that that was ridiculous. So we basically said, okay, we may very well be prepared to consider that, consider continuing to maintain our deposit, but it'd have to be at certainly not a 10-year horizon, perhaps to 3 to 5 years, and it had to be at a more attractive interest rate, perhaps tied to LIBOR. So this was communicated to Kosoy. Secondly, they wanted for the NIB to, in essence, ring-fence its deposits. In essence, that what they wanted was for the NIB to basically accept a position that just because it is an institutional shareholder, its deposits in the bank should in fact be tied to any losses as if that was a shareholder loss. And we could not accept it.
He said in the final analysis, the NIB went back to Kosoy, explaining why they won't accept the offer. Quelch added that then Kosoy came back with a revised proposal. He said some with the same information, but not prepared to take any risk, and NIB was totally not in agreement.
You know, the advice that we basically instructed counsel to advise on some of these issues, they've pointed out the issues of concern, we've communicated to them, and that was an ongoing process of discussion and deliberation. Notwithstanding the fact that we thought that a lot of the stuff contained in Kosoy's proposal was rubbish. I mean, frankly, excuse my, frank expression, because a lot of it was rubbish. We were not under any circumstances going to tie up NIB's fund under the control of somebody else. NIB has no measure of control, right, for 10 years at some ridiculous rate of interest. It was not going to happen.
He said it made no business sense, and the proposals just kept coming in various fashions, with the recent proposal on April 20th. Meantime, Kosoy described NIB's lawyer as unprofessional. This Quelch said he was deeply offended.
Deeply offended, frankly. I mean, Ariel Mizik is in fact one of our most preeminent QCs. I mean, he's a man of enormous talent, and we're proud, deeply proud, to have someone of that ilk, and also a son of the soil, advising the board from time to time. And so, this guy obviously, just went overboard. And but and I don't know what is his, I can only imagine that his motivation for doing all of this sort of stuff is to try and strike a divisive wedge between the NIB and the contributors of the bank and all that sort of stuff. The fact of the matter is NIB is already substantially exposed in this bank, and we would have to have a damn good reason to justify any further exposure.
Quelch said the NIB are on the same playing field as depositors and other shareholders. He said the NIB would never enter into an agreement with no positive returns nor guarantees for the people of the Turks and Caicos Islands.
Well, the thing is that the fact of the matter is that NIB is in the same position as any of the creditors, shareholders, or stakeholders generally in the bank. NIB is in no different position. The only difference is NIB might have a more substantial amount invested in this bank or deposited in this bank than someone else, but we're in a no different position. If there is a good deal to be struck for the creditors or other shareholders of the bank, it is a good deal for NIB. If it is not a good deal for NIB, it is not a good deal for them. Make absolutely no mistake about it, right? Some of those creditors are also contributors to the NIB. NIB has a fundamental duty to the thousands of its creditors, thousands of its contributors, okay? And we're not going to let them down.
For WIB4 News, I'm Takara Bain.